What's up, Kings fans? I'm finally back in the film room and here with a video that's long overdue. If you've been around, then you're probably aware of my Keon Ellis agenda, and needless to say, this season saw all of my dreams come into fruition. After a rookie season mainly spent in the G League, Keon entered year 2 trying to carve a spot for himself in the rotation. He initially got a couple of chances as a backup point guard, before securing the starting 2-guard spot later in the season once Kevin Huerter went down with injury. Keon made the most of his opportunities and should have solidified himself as a core member of this group going forward. Entering March 6, the Sacramento Kings had a defensive rating of 116.5, which ranked 20th in the league at that time. March 6 is also the day that Keon Ellis permanently entered their rotation, and from that point onward the Kings had the number 3 defense in the league at 108.6. That's a drastic difference, and though Keon isn't the sole reason for that growth, his impact was still massive. Nearly every metric you can find only reinforces this stance as well. Just take a look at his defensive profile on Basketball Index. He also had a defensive EPM of a positive 1.9, and you can see the names and company around him here. This is also the highest mark on the Kings roster as a whole. Keon is the kind of defensive playmaker the Kings were desperately looking for, and his defensive instincts really popped off ball. He's a true ball hawk, someone who's seemingly always in the right position and is a menace in the passing lanes. He anticipates these passes about as well as anyone in the league. Keon's great at detecting actions, here recognizing Cleveland's pick and roll and stepping up to swipe the ball from Mobley on the catch. That ball hawk term is fitting for Keon, with how often he's able to make these plays on the ball. He's always lurking and specializes in making these plays from the weak side of the court. I love the way Keon plays too, specifically on these weak side X-outs, where Keon is tasked with essentially either of these players, mainly wherever the ball is skipped to. Watch the cat and mouse game he plays here, shifting over to the corner man, but he does this to bait the pass to the wing and ends up getting a deflection. Keon gets a lot of his steals in deflections like this, and again it really emphasizes some of the IQ and instincts that he has on that end. That idea of baiting these passes to be made is a consistent theme for Keon defensively. The windows that look like they're there for offensive players are actually much smaller than they appear, as Keon has the tools to make up for any lost space. Only about 6'3 or 6'4, but Keon has nearly a 6'9 wingspan, and he's extremely quick off the ground with absolutely phenomenal reaction time. Some of the more instinctual stuff from Keon is just special, here detecting this exit screen from OKC and getting himself behind it. But as the drive comes, Keegan is forced to step up and Keon takes the screener instead, and yet again causes another turnover with his active hands. And there's nothing like a 6'3 low man. Watch Keon here on the weak side rotate over early and get to his spot and just eliminate this attempt from Moses Brown. We would see some of these low man and rim protecting chops from Ellis throughout the season. Obviously with his size, he can only make so much of an impact, but he was never shy about contesting at the rim. We talked about Keon's weak side defense, but he's just as dangerous in the gaps, usually one pass away. Most players will usually just stunt in these single gaps, but Keon uses those active hands to take away any driving lanes here. A lot of those physical and athletic tools we've already mentioned allow him to play this aggressive style of defense. He can help further in these gaps because he has the ability to recover and get good contests on any kickouts. Another reason I love Keon is this constant motor. Not only is he always active and disruptive, but he doesn't have an off switch either. He flies by on his contest here, but instead of giving up on the play, he ends up forcing a turnover with his patented cat and mouse game. So much of what Keon does defensively goes unnoticed, such as the communication and rotations he makes. Here picking up the cutter in transition to take away that pass, only to have to close out to the corner on the skip. The ball gets reversed and Keon sinks in on the drive, then when another cutter breaks free he takes that away, then signals for Malik to take the corner. An entire defensive possession held together by Keon Ellis. When defending at the point of attack, Keon is just simply put an absolute pest. He possesses incredible lateral quickness and hip mobility, and combined with his active hands makes him the ultimate on-ball menace. Keon plays a very jumpy and herky-jerky brand of defense with some very unorthodox movements. Just watch the deceleration here, sliding and even hitting a teammate, but never loses his balance in the process, flips his hips and stays attached. And I find myself constantly impressed with his ability to seamlessly change directions like this. These traits make it nearly impossible for offensive players to create significant space on Keon without a screen. He's picking up Dame past half court in transition here, which would normally be a hugely advantageous situation for Dame, but Keon is no ordinary defender and instead bottles him up. Keon's frame has oftentimes been viewed as a weakness, with him having a relatively thin build, but he's developed underrated upper body strength, allowing him to combat the more physically bruising guards in the league. Here he's absorbing that push-off from Desmond Bane and gives him zero space of separation while deciding to just erase the shot attempt. Keon willingly takes these shots to the chest and has the discipline to stay vertical on his contests most of the time. Even getting a step on Keon isn't enough for most players with his recovery and closing speed, making him a legit chase down block threat. Again, just a ridiculous ball hawk and always finds a way to make a play on the ball. Even mistiming his jump and transition here, he still manages to get a hand on the ball on the way down. I also like some of these little nuances and attention to detail in Keon's game. For instance, favoring a side contest on Brunson's strong hand to disrupt his shooting motion without making contact. I've talked a bit about Keon's jumpy style defensively, which leads to a lot of unorthodox movements. Like here, when Conley attacks his closeout, he spins to change directions instead of opening his hips up, which catapults him back into the play. But watch this time how he does open his hips and puts himself in a position to cut off the drive. Keon's constant pressure makes him a good cover in ball screen defense, and he's one of those dudes who just refuses to be screened. He usually draws lead guard assignments, which means he's pressuring the ball the moment they cross half court, and even then he's still going over screens most of the time on the perimeter. So even though this screen is set out near the logo, Keon is still going to go over, and he does so by staying attached with Bane here. He keeps his hand on Bane's hip through the screen, and quickly closes the small amount of space generated from the pick. Keon is elite at this ability to get skinny, which I've touched on before. Once he knows that pick from AD is coming, he steps up, which is going to give him more space to stay attached to the ball handler, while also extending AD further out in the perimeter. Ideally, Keon's initial slide out of the screen here would cut D'Lo off, but AD kind of sticks his body out and makes that impossible. Even with that, there's basically no space or advantage generated, and Keon ends up kicking this pocket pass. He's awesome off ball too, here chasing Booker and eliminating nearly all space. Even having to go around this pick, Keon never lets Booker get in front of him. But Keon's unique skill set and feel allow him to do things his way sometimes. Watch him shoot around this screen here instead of chasing over and staying attached. Yet he still gets a hand on the ball anyways. Here D'Lo actually catches Keon cheating over on this LeBron screen, so he rejects it, but Keon manages to stay attached to his hip getting downhill. As the help from Sabonis comes, Keon peels off and anticipates the drop off pass to AD, and sure enough he guessed correct. This ball pressure and willingness to fight through screens predictably makes Keon an illegal screen merchant, and whether some of these calls are legit or not, you gotta admit that he sells them pretty well. Some of this aggression does hurt Keon, as he can get caught being a little too handsy on the ball. Crafty dudes like Brunson were really taking advantage of this and getting easy calls against a young UDFA like Keon. The first couple cracks of the rotation Keon had came at the backup one, and though it's not his natural position, we saw him progress as a ball handler and decision maker. Most of these are simple reads, whether it be hitting Sabonis on the short roll with 2 on the ball, or reading the tag man over and kicking it to the corner, but I've definitely been impressed with Keon's growth. He even showed us some creativity here, snaking the pick and roll back to his left, drawing 2, and dishing it to Sabonis for an easy finish. But overall, Keon's lack of rim pressure and overall downhill scoring ability really caps his abilities creating out of the pick and roll or DHOs. He is not a real threat getting downhill and finishing at the rim, nor is he shown a consistent in-between game or floater quite yet. With that being said, Keon was actually in the 98th percentile as a handoff scorer this season, though that was pretty much solely due to his shooting out of these actions. Keon became accustomed to shooting off DHOs and penalized defenders for going under these screens. Keon ended up shooting just under 42% from deep this season, and on decent volume at just about 3 attempts per game. About 70% of these looks are catch and shoot attempts, where he was again right about 42%. And on wide open threes, he was up above 47%. All of that to say, Keon really shot the lights out during his sophomore campaign. He was effective in a variety of ways, rather it was being left open on double sin at Fox or Sabonis, or spotting up on the weak side of the floor. Keon took full advantage of the limited defensive attention that he saw and really proved himself as a shooter. Keon has a bit of a unique jumper. He keeps a very narrow base and brings the ball up on the left side of his body as a righty, so both of his knees are usually pointed inward and nearly touching while he brings the ball up to his left during his dip. But the follow through and release is beautiful, and overall I love the fluidity of his jumper altogether. This motion is consistent, though it limits Keon's ability as a movement shooter, especially going right. Developing Keon's point guard skills has helped turn him into a solid connector offensively. This connective passing is huge for Sacramento's offense. For instance, with Fox drawing 2 to the ball, he can slip to the short roll, take a dribble to draw the defense, then kick to the open man. He's got great feel for these spots. When Monk drives and doesn't have an outlet here, Keon can just slot cut behind the defense and dump it off to Domas. Now, I have absolutely zero idea what the Kings will do this offseason or what the roster will look like next year. But with Keon's two-way play and the importance of his role in Sacramento, I believe he's worthy of the starting two-guard position. There's no denying the impact that he made once entering the lineup, especially on the defensive side of the ball. 2024 may not have gone well for the Kings as a whole, but with the development of someone like Keon Ellis, I still can't really look at this season as a complete failure. So thank you guys for watching and supporting the channel, and it's fun to be back and making content. Hope you guys enjoyed, and see you all next time.